that we understand there are a lot of requirements out there and how we're going to balance those requirements. There's also places where we're not engaged in the war fight where we've got a lot of folks doing business. And then we never know when a humanitarian event is going to come up. And also, what about disasters right here in our home country? Now, I happen to be a Guard guy, so my view is we have a first responsibility to take care of the people that live in this country. And that's always the way that Guard folks look at those issues. And I think most anybody else in hometown America would look at it the same way. Then we need to factor that into our planning processes so that we're not in a pickup game when we have an emergency in this country. We need to learn how to do business together. That needs to be part of a planned process. So as we look forward to the QDR, these are a few things that I think we have in front of us. We're going to have a new president. We'll have a different view of the world. New national security team. New leadership in many of the federal agencies, most of the federal agencies. Department of Homeland Security is going to change. State Department is going to change. Justice is going to change. All these factors have something to do with how we put our business together. And we've got all new players coming in at the time that we're getting ready to start the process. Also, by the way, we have a few changes in Congress coming up. And they always get a big vote in how we do business. We've got the economic situation. How do we deal with the current economic situation, and what does that mean to us in the Department of Defense? Those of you that have looked at the entitlements that we provide to the people of this country realize that our entitlements are growing dramatically, which means our discretionary funds, which pays for the Department of Defense and other things like us, are getting smaller. So we've got to figure out how to work that piece. And then we've got competing priorities, obviously. So here's where we are. We've got a force that may not be big enough to do all the things that we're trying to do right now. In my view, we have a mismatch of requirements versus capabilities because we can't, I don't think you could ever get it exactly right, but you need to get as close as you possibly can. And I think we've got a lot of work to do in agility. I have an expression, it's my expression, I say move electrons, not soldiers. And we're not always good at that. So we've got to do a lot of work in automation to make things better for our troops. And then we're planning for an unknown future requirement, which makes things a little bit more complicated. So to give you a few of those issues, we're looking at future force structures that we're not sure about, dramatic increases in technology, acquisition costs that are just going absolutely through the overhead. Weapons are much more lethal than they used to be, so we don't need as many. So that creates a lot of issues because, especially on the air side, which units are going to be taken out of the force and how are we going to balance that piece. And then we have the possibility of more issues here at home because of the way that the world is changing. The threat is much greater inside the United States than it used to be. So what does all that mean for those of us that are reserve component type folks? Let me give you a statement that I hear from RC people fairly regularly, and I think it's very wrong, which is they say we have to go protect our equities. And I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is we have to go be part of the solution for the nation. Our equities are part of the solution. Our equities are part of the big team. If we make an adequate contribution to the big team, we don't have to worry about protecting where we are because we're a valued resource in the fight. The other thing that I think we really have to work hard on is interoperability. We've got a lot of work to do. When you build a force that's obsolescent, when you build a force that's manned at 70% and you deploy that force at 100%, you can't get there. So what happens is when you deploy the first unit out, that's fine because you've crossed level from the second unit. When you deploy the second unit, it gets more difficult, and when you get to the third and fourth unit, you're broken. And if you're trying to do a rotational type operation, you can't do it. So you've got to man the force to be able to respond to the requirement. You also have to be able to sustain it. Now, I didn't bring today the recruiting and retention slides, but I think those of you that follow this know that that's really a great news story. We've been able to recruit and retain. Everybody's doing extremely well. But the question becomes, where is the red line? How do we know when we're going to break our force? We haven't so far, but we've got to be careful about how we do that. And then the last comment I would make, which I think is real important, is what is it that the reserve component really brings to the warfight? And I'll just tell you what I think they bring to the warfight, and I'm going to turn the clock back about 40 years. They bring America to the warfight. This nation has been smart enough in this war to separate the war from the warrior. And they may not agree with the war, but they sure support the men and women that are conducting the war. And I believe that's largely due to the fact that we brought the reserve components to this war and we left them mostly at home during Vietnam. So I'll just leave it right there. Okay, Todd, I guess you're next.